Okay, welcome. Welcome to this Conscious Leadership in Action podcast. I'm Dr. Paul Ward, your host. I'm a leadership coach. I'm the director of the Global Center for Conscious Leadership, and I'm the author of the book, The Inner Journey to Conscious Leadership. And the title of today's podcast is Sacred Changemakers with my guest, Jayne Warrilow. Welcome, Jayne.
Hi, Paul. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be with you in conversation. I think we've got a lot to talk about.
We do. I'm looking forward to it too. Well, the purpose of these Conscious Leadership in Action podcasts is to advance conscious leadership for the greater good of humanity. Now, we have lots of definitions of consciousness, but part of that is a mindfulness. And so I like to start these sessions just with a moment of mindfulness, a purposeful pause, if you like. So those listening, as long as you're not driving, I'd invite you just to close your eyes for a moment, your feet flat on the floor, and just take a few really deep, calming breaths. Breathing in through your nose, holding just for a few seconds. Breathing out through the mouth and just letting the out breath be longer than the in breath. So let's just take a few really deep breaths and then just a moment of silence before we begin our conversation today. Okay, good. Well, let me spend a moment just introducing my guest today. So Jayne is the founder of the Coaches Business School. And I have to say that's where I first met Jayne as part of the work that she does there. A lot of great teaching, a lot of great programs and some good coaching. So a great business school. And that's where we first connected. And Jayne's also a founder of the Sacred Changemakers University and the Changemakers Society. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into our conversation today. Now, Jayne's a global speaker and a sought-after business and executive coach. And she's also an author of the 10-Day Coaches MBA, The Profitable Coach, The Secret Language of Resonance, and An Energy Awakening. So this is Jayne. Okay. All right. Well, Jayne, thanks again for being in conversation with me today. I am looking forward to hearing more about the Sacred Changemakers University and the Changemakers Society, but I really like to begin with you sharing a little about your own journey and how you ended up here doing this work that you're doing today.
How long have you got? Well, gosh, how did I end up here? Yeah, if I look back on my life, I could never have imagined in a million years that I would be here doing this work like now. And here in the US as well, I think there's been so many interesting developments in my life. And, and then there's some threads that I suppose connect through everything. But I'll try and give you the highlights so that we don't take up too much time. But so I did obviously I'm from the UK originally. I now live in the US. But I started out at university, as most of us do, doing a degree, and it was in communication studies, which is kind of ironic now, and I chose that because I didn't know what I wanted to do at all. I did that, but then I soon majored in psychology and linguistics, and I did my dissertation on fringe medicine, of all things. Wow. Which is what we called it back then. It was like all the unorthodox kind of therapies and treatments, and some of them were a little bit spiritual, and and in those days they were really quite outlawed in the UK. And I was kind of diving into why we ended up with the medical system we did, and why these other things were kind of like outlawed. And this is really important because that started my interest, really. And I think I'd had an interest in spirituality and the invisible aspects of life and all the mysteries of life from being really young. Everything from aliens to, you know, kind of what happens after we die, to like this whole spiritual conversation. And I wasn't brought up in a religious family, so there was no kind of tensions for me there. I was just exploring all these weird and wonderful like worlds. And I did a lot of that through reading. I've always been an avid reader. And that kind of shaped my personal life. So I was on a spiritual path from a very young age. I learned to read the tarot. I think I was about 12 years old when I learned to read the tarot and all these different things, and was on spiritual retreats and all those things, and became an energy healer and a spiritual healer. And that was kind of my personal life. And then in my professional life, I used my psychology degree to go into occupational psychology, and then moved into leadership development. So I've always worked in human change, human potential, and also business development and strategic work from the beginning of my career, really. And I worked first with consultancies, then I went to work for a few retailers, and then moved into my own business in 1996. So I've been self-employed since then, and I think it's probably true to say I am no longer employable at all now. But so, and on that side in my professional career, excuse me, it's all about leadership. For me, it was all about helping people become the best they could be. And even back then, I felt leadership was a very like personal leadership, not just the status you were given by an organization, which was kind of how it was viewed back then in the early 90s. And so I worked with a lot of leaders, worked through a lot of change processes in organizations, and then finally set up my own consultancy in 96. And I never thought these two worlds of like spirituality and kind of my healing and my energy work would ever come together with my leadership and business and strategic work at all. And then when was it, 2001, I gave birth to Jacob, my third child and my youngest son, and sustained a massive medical injury that was misdiagnosed for nearly a year in the UK. And I lived in Norwich at the time, which is like very rural.
Yeah.
So the research that they were doing on me there, they weren't getting anywhere or finding what was wrong with me at all. So I just carried on working, as you do, or as I do. And then I was actually in front of a board of directors in London when I collapsed in front of them, was rushed to hospital, and because I was in London, got some of the best care that we have in the UK. And they diagnosed me with spinal cord issues. I had my kidneys were failing and my bladder was severely infected. And I was in a lot of pain. And then what then happened was the medical profession kicked in. I had a number of surgeries, nothing worked. And so my pain just kept getting worse. I was bedridden. And when I did go out, I was in a wheelchair because my legs would go from under me and I couldn't stand because of the pain. And I was on opiate medication. And this carried on for about 3 years. And I finally got to a point where I thought I had to sell my consultancy. And I got to the point where I thought, I need my life back, because I'd lost everything. I'd lost my professional identity. I'd lost my identity as a mom. Couldn't even read a book because when you're on morphine, your pupils are dilated and you can't focus. And so I went to see one of the top neurourologists, and she was doing research at Imperial College London. So I paid a lot of money to go and see her, and her team did 2 days of tests on me to tell me, and this woman had no compassion at all in her body. And I sometimes wonder where I would be today if she had been very nice to me, but she wasn't. She just said to me, Jayne, I'm really sorry to tell you, but you're never going to come off the morphine. You're never going to come off the medication. You're not going to get your life back. In fact, we've concluded that you're going to lose your life, and the maximum we think you've got is 10 years from the date of the original injury, because you're on a downward slope now. And so what I suggest you do is go home and make the most of the time you've got left with your kids. And then she dismissed me.
Wow.
And I fell to pieces, I think it's true to say. And to cut a long story short, I then went back to my first dissertation. This is where that plays in. And then started to I realized I knew a lot of psychology. I knew a lot of healing, but it was all in my head. I wasn't living it in my body. So then I used different practitioners, and particularly an Oriental doctor, Chinese doctor, who really helped me to get into my body. And we had a whole team of different therapists doing different body works, and everything from aromatherapy to osteopathy to homeopathy, everything we were trying. Some things worked, some things didn't. But I never thought I would get my life back. And thankfully, gosh, I did. And that's when everything changed for me. And so, you know, the terminology of conscious leadership, that was when, going back to work after that, I actually did a master's degree to try out my what my body could and couldn't do. And then went back to, I was called in by a client who didn't know I'd been ill, actually, in London. And I got my husband to drive me down because I wasn't sure what I could and couldn't do still. And I remember walking across to the corner office of this guy, a senior leader, and walking across to this corner office with him. And I could just feel the energy draining out of me, right? And it was like walking into the living dead, right? That's what it felt like in this corporate space. And I was like in this fight or flight reaction. And I thought, like, has it always been like this? And I've never noticed. And then I realized I had to bring my worlds together, and all of the consciousness, the spirituality, the energy work, I had to bring that into corporate life and integrate these two like big bodies of work that I was aware of, which was the leadership and the business and the strategy, with resonance and energy and everything I knew from the spiritual path and healing. And that's what really started the body of work of resonance. So then we moved to the States and moved to Florida initially, because when you have the medical condition I have, according to Chinese medicine, you don't live in a damp, wet climate. So that was why we moved. We up sticks, 3 children, and Nick, my husband, bless him, we all moved to the US. And that was also a shift, because it was just as technology was starting to come over to the UK, but we still hadn't fully embraced it in terms of business. Whereas coming to the US, I mean, all my clients were still in Europe and the UK. So I had to learn the technology piece, which was a huge and steep learning curve, but really freed up my business, because I now work globally and online mainly. And so that was great. And then I got coaches coming to me asking how to do what I did, which was then the resonant coaching was born. And then I realized that coaches couldn't have the impact unless they understood the business more. So Coaches Business School was born, which was more about a conscious and coach-like approach to business rather than some of the internet marketing stuff that's out there. And then more recently, it has moved into stepping even further into the consciousness and spiritual path with Sacred Changemakers.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I have to say, I'm delighted that the London doctor got it all wrong.
I know. And I sometimes wonder if she'd been nicer to me, maybe I'd have believed her a little bit more. I don't know. But she triggered something in me that I just thought, you know, I know that you think, right, that this is what's going to happen to me, but maybe this isn't how my story has to end.
Yeah.
Maybe I can think something different. And I had nothing to lose, because it was about my survival.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what happened. And I'm pretty good at rebelling, and I'm not a good patient, and I'm not very conformist. So it did feed into my normal pattern. And so I just used it to survive. And thankfully it worked.
It's a great message too for those who, and there's plenty of people who are suffering with something, a traumatic incident, and it's a great message for anyone in that situation not to give up, but to be persistent and be positive, just as you are and you were back then. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no worries. And if anybody's listening and they are going through it, when I say it like I have, it sounds very trite and very easy, and look at me now, I'm amazing. But it wasn't. It was really hard and uncertain, and 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And I had no idea at all, because this was before people like Bruce Lipton had done his research into the biology of belief and things. This was before all of that. And yet, from my psychology, I just had a sense that what I believed would impact. And so one of the things I did, which it sounds weird even to this day, was I decided to live from my left cheek because my left cheek didn't have any pain at all.
Ah,
Other parts of my body did, but if I could just be like my left cheek, I'd be all right.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
We talked a lot about consciousness and how those sort of
yeah.
the business world and this whole conscious spiritual world has come together. How have you found applying that consciousness, that spiritual side, in business leaders, for business leaders in the business world?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, and I don't know that I can give you any blanket answer. And the reason for that is I notice in different parts of the world, there's different things are acceptable, like in terms of our language, for example, because our language, once we move into consciousness and energy and the spiritual path, you know, a lot of those words are not accepted in business. So for many years, it's been cloak and dagger stuff. You know, I, I laugh sometimes with some of my other coaching clients where we talk about the fact that, you know, we sell people what they think they want, which might be leadership development, for example, or, you know, a change process or whatever it is, culture, whatever. And then once we get into the work, then we give them what they need. And that was true for me for a number of years. And I think I was very fearful of kind of speaking to this other side of me, because I didn't want it to diminish the rigor and my master's degree and the strategic work. And I didn't want people to point fingers at me and like laugh and think, oh, look, she's over there, you know, with the angel lady, and, you know, Jayne thinks that there's fairies and stuff. Like I just didn't want them to put me in that box. And unfortunately, you know, that's what we do with stereotypes. We put people in boxes. So it's been a gradual process of redefining certain words and showing this integration, and then proving the results that it brings in organizations. And the move from the UK to the US in 2009 was well, going to Florida particularly was like going back for me, I would say, about 15 years in my career. It was fascinating because people were still wanting me to do things like run appraisal trainings in organizations in Florida, and they didn't even understand the difference between management and leadership, a number of clients that I was talking to, never mind, like, you know, conscious leadership. And so that was interesting. And then, you know, working in different states in the US, very, very different in different places. And, you know, I've had clients from Silicon Valley, East Coast, West Coast, clients in the middle, North, South. It's all very different. And I also notice how in Europe, the conversation is more accepted. It's like with my European clients, it's moved on somewhat.
Mm.
And there's a lot more awareness, I think, and a lot more awareness around things like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Whereas in America, and certainly in certain states, there really isn't an awareness of it at all. And there's still, in some organizations, command and control rules. So it's interesting because I do believe I have to meet people where they are and then bring them like step by step on the journey with me.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison, and I do think there are some shifts here in pockets in the US. We're starting
Yes.
to see at least individual leaders and some companies
Yes.
being a lot more open to have the conversation. And as you say, the words we use and you know, things like consciousness and spirituality and even love, working those sort of words into the work
Yeah.
is starting to happen. Uh, More in some places than others, but it's good to see that opening the door, and people like yourself and others are opening those conversations. And I wanted to sort of dig into this new venture, and I think it's a new venture for you, the Sacred Changemakers University. And I've been tracking along with you, and I'm proud to be one of the founding members of the Changemakers Society. And I'm still learning my way through what is an immense resource that you have. But share a little bit about how you came to create the Sacred Changemakers University and what you hope to achieve with it.
Yeah. Well, it was a little bit like a perfect storm in a way. Um, and yeah, so how I came to create it, it's funny because for me, this is a very different business. This, like my other businesses, I can say quite clearly that they germinated with an idea in my head. And then I built around that idea and then kind of took it to the world and then networked and, made it work. This is very different. In some ways, this feels like, it's funny because some of my Asian clients have talked to me and said, oh, this is really a yin business, right? So they talk about yin and yang, which I suppose loosely you could put to masculine and feminine in some ways. But the yang energy in Chinese culture is about like pushing, and a more masculine energy is going out there in the doing space. Whereas this is much more receptive, this is much more organic. And you'll understand why I'm saying that when I tell you how it kind of came to be. So a few things happened for me last year. I was recovering from I had a car accident, which meant I was recovering again. So I had some time to kind of reflect on where I was in my life and the work that I was doing. And also my first grandchild was born. And that kind of took me by surprise in many ways, how I responded to that. But kind of also with my global client base, some of the conversations I was having around like where we are in the world and the future and shaping our future and kind of what's in store for us as leaders and organizations and businesses and the way that business is going. And starting to feel that like I feel I've always done work that's mattered to me, but more than ever now, and I've always tended to work with innovators and trailblazers, but more than ever now, I want to work with people who are conscious and are aware and are kind of doing something meaningful with their life. And when I say meaningful, I don't just mean meaningful to them, which is where it all begins, but meaningful to the world. And there's a quote that I came across early last year, and it was, do you want to be the best in the world, or do you want to be the best for the world?
Yeah.
And it's only a few letters different. And I remember sitting with this quote and thinking, wow, I think if I'm honest, I've spent a lot of time being the best in the world. And I don't know that I can honestly turn to my granddaughter and say, yeah, I'm doing the best for the world. And it was a huge shift for me that put me in a place where I was like, okay, so what would that be if I was doing the best for the world? Like where does what needs me, right? Where does the world need me? And so I started to think about that. And then I started to think about, okay, so I've got a sense of what needs me, but what feeds me, what inspires me, what's going to have the most impact in the world. So I'd already started to do this when, after a surgery I had in May, I'm a meditator, so I sat down in meditation, and then sometimes I channel from spirit or the universal consciousness, whatever you want to call it. And so I knew there was a message coming through, and I just kind of, I've learned over the years and been on a lot of spiritual development programs to learn how to move to one side and then just let the information flow through me. And I turn on my iPhone and I speak and I record the message, and then I listen back to it. And this day there was nothing different about it. When I do that, I don't have any conscious awareness of the message that's come through till I listen back. And on this day in May, I was in a bit of pain, and I sat down to meditate to try and alleviate some of the pain that I was in. And I knew a message was coming through, so I just turned on my phone, recorded, turned it off at the end, sat there for a bit, and then just went on with my day. And just before I went to bed that night, I thought, oh, I'll listen to the message. What was it? Because normally it's for me or a client or a friend or somebody, some advice or some wisdom. And it was like nothing I'd ever heard. And it was called The Sacred Invitation. And it was this, it felt like an ancient story. And there was a part of me that I like to think of as my soul that remembered this story, remembered why I was here on the earth, And it speaks of sacred change makers, of coming to this earth at this time to make a difference, to remind humanity that we are capable of building, you know, a world that really creates integrity for all life. And I started to think about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the fact that a number of organizations were speaking to that, you know, marketing to it, but weren't living it in their inside reality, in their cultures. And then I'd had a few conversations with some leaders about they wanted to do that, but they didn't know how to. And, you know, and then it just all started to come together that, like, it was time for me to pull together a community of people that are here on this earth to make a difference and to really bring in and usher in the changes, the evolutionary changes that, you know, humanity can choose to take or not. And the interesting thing is I don't feel attached to the outcome. I just want to know that I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah.
And using my skills in the way that I can bring people together, because our problems are so complex. No one person's got the answer. So if we come together, then maybe we can really make a difference. So that's what Sacred Change Makers is all about. And as I was putting it together, the receptive part of it was, so, you know, I felt like, oh, I'll go and decide what this is. And I just kept getting stopped every time I tried to put it together last May. It was like, nope, you got to wait. And so I've allowed it to flow through me, and it's shaped itself. It's an energy. I'm in dialogue with it. It's deciding what it wants. And that's why it's a bit slower in its growth, but it's organic and it feels right that I am listening to it instead of commanding it as a business. I'm listening to it. The right people are showing up in the right time. And, you know, when the time is right, I get shown the next piece and we move into something else. And the other thing that it really wanted, and I know it sounds weird me talking in this way, but I kept getting this, you've got to be the solution, not just teach the solution. You've got to be the solution. And for ages, I didn't know what that was. And then into my peripheral like community came this guy that he's in Singapore. He set up a business called B1G1 and makes it very easy to, he doesn't call it a charity, but it makes it very easy for me to integrate giving projects around the world into what we do. So instead of doing like joint venture partnerships or affiliate relationships where we give people affiliate fees for introducing people, what we're doing is impact badges. So we've gamified the website. We've had a whole bespoke technology platform built. And now our members, just by being our members, are making a direct impact on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as they learn and grow themselves, which just really excites me.
Thank you. And you set a mission on these impacts. So tell us a little bit about the mission and what sort of impacts they are, and how can people participate?
Yeah, so the impacts, we've a few running at the moment, and the main one is when people come in as a member to our community. Then what we're doing is we've chosen the Rainforest Reforestation Project as one of our main missions, and our overall mission is to make over 1 million impacts in the next decade. And I think we're on the way to doing that. And so, and I believe it's achievable. So it sounds like a lot because 1 million's a lot, but that's what we're aiming to do. And every time somebody comes in as a member, then we plant 15 trees in the Rainforest Reforestation Project. Then every member that comes in also has an affiliate link, and this is an impact link. If they share that and bring other friends and colleagues in, then that actually has an impact on our monthly campaign. So we have a monthly campaign, and running at the moment is because of all the issues that are the challenges of the fires in Australia. We are supporting the Australian Bushfires Project for the communities, the people and the wildlife that has been displaced because of the fires. So we're actually also producing impacts there that are being run by charities on the ground in Australia. And what's great about these impacts is, unlike other charities, because I looked long and hard to be able to do this, and I didn't want our money to be going to like administration for the charity. We pay a membership to be in B1G1. That covers all the administration. So everything that we get from our members goes directly to the projects. And so, you know, we have a different monthly campaign every month, and we are doing everything all across the world, from the UK to the US to different parts of Europe, Russia, Moldova. We've got African countries as well, India, Ethiopia. Gosh, we've got so many different projects now that we're involved with. And right now we're involved in smaller ways, but I can see these growing now. And I think this month in this last month, we've more or less doubled our impact that it was in January. And we're now at, I think I looked this morning and it was 1,345 impacts, which doesn't sound a lot, but we've only been going for a few months, and it's like, yay.
Right. Yeah.
So so that's what we're up to in the world, and our members have the ability to shape our future. And what I mean by that is not just shaping the global future, but shaping our community's future. So this is where the receptivity of the business model comes in. We're going to be having community calls where our members are going to be deciding what projects we're going to be supporting going forward, and also speaking to, you know, what would support them best in their change making and keep them inspired and motivated to keep doing the work they're doing. And we can fill any knowledge gaps and, you know, bring in people to actually train online as well. So we've got a whole vision of what this could be, but the members are going to decide what it will be.
Yes, well, that's thank you for sharing. For me personally, I've been involved really from an early stage when you first inspired us to join. It's a wonderful, I guess, call it an initiative, but that doesn't describe it really. But it really is. It's something that is not only learning, and I love the phrase that you used in terms of it's not only learning. But it's about engaging, learning, and giving. I love the three. Can you say just a little bit more about engage, learn, and give?
Yes, definitely. So engage, learn, and give. Well, for me, everything's about engagement. It's all about relationships, right? And specifically when I think about change, and that's what we're facing right now globally, is the changes that the world needs from us. But that goes right down to different levels of systems. So for me, when I say the word engage, I'm not just meaning like engage with each other, but engage with ourselves as well. Like, how are we resonating? How are we showing up authentically with what matters most to us? So I think it's really important that every member defines for themselves, like, what their purpose is with this and how they engage with that in that like relationship space. What's the energy they're showing up with? What's the becoming energy for them in that? So that's really important. And then for me, that always leads then to learning, because that raises your awareness, you know. And you know, we do speak a lot about energy and resonance in the community. And so it is then about like, what are you aware of? What are you learning? And what do you need to learn? What do you need to learn to be your best and inspire these changes in yourself and other people? And I really believe still that everything begins inside. And, you know, I love the teacher, Julio Alala, when he speaks about his ontological learning. And I saw him in a TED talk recently, and he was saying that, you know, we often look outside of ourselves for the problems and the things that we need to do in our lives and in our relationships and in our world. But really, that's only part of the learning, because if nothing changes inside, then nothing is going to change on the outside. So what is it that we need to learn about ourselves to become who we need to be to make the changes in the world? And that just spoke volumes to me. So I loved that. And so that's the engage and the learn. And then, of course, the giving is us giving of ourselves, giving of our time and resources. But it's also, I think, where a lot of us get meaning and fulfillment when we start to give beyond ourselves, when we connect to something that's bigger than just this one life. And we can do that in the connection. So it's actually a spiral, going back to the engage. But, it really is about, how are we giving of ourselves, and then also in the energetic exchange, what is that giving back to us? And so, being the solution, we're tying everything directly into impact. So that's where, for me, it's not just about us teaching and inspiring and helping and supporting our community members in this work, but it's also about enabling them to give as they go. So that's what it's about.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll share the link to the university and at the end. But
Thank you.
we'll just talk a little bit more about this unfolding, if you like. And I love the fact that this is not a project that you're rushing through. It's something that's emerging. I think that's important for all of us. And when I think about the 17 UN sustainability goals, I mean, they cover a big area. And one of the challenges I think that we all face is that we want to do so much, and yet we have to. I think for me anyway, I'm looking to say, so where can we make that difference? And so it's not a case of rushing in. We can all help in certain ways, but for me, it's about unfolding. And so I'm letting it emerge and see where I get called to serve.
Yeah, and I think that is absolutely what. I mean, I love hearing you say that, Paul, because that is, in some ways, for us in the Western world, at least, that's something that I think, we're very quick to move into action. We're in the spirit of doing a lot. Like we have that like a prized possession almost. So this idea of slowing down, of being receptive, of allowing something to emerge through us, of being generative in our leadership even, is something that I think we need to cultivate and practice more, because I don't think we have enough of it. And if we're constantly on and rushing, we miss so much of life. We miss so many opportunities in business as well. And the other thing I want to say is that, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, when you first look at them, they look huge. Like you think, oh my gosh, I've got to build an empire to make a difference, right? And what I'm learning the more I'm staying in relationship with them is, it's not about that. Like, we can all be change makers. It's just about the small things that we all do consistently that can make a difference. And one of the things I've been exploring in the magazine that our members got, you may have seen it, is this idea of just conscious consumerism.
Yeah.
And, just like thinking about and getting intentional about, where and who I invest in with my money and my grocery shopping and all those things. And I was talking to a woman the other day, and she's one of our members. She blew me away because she was saying that at Christmas this year, she's got 2 young children, and her children had written their list for Santa Claus, and she was looking down it, and there was all these plastic toys in it. And she thought, do I really want to buy these plastic toys for my kids? Because they're going to end up in a landfill. Do I really want to do that? Right? So she sat down with, and I think she said an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, I think. She sat down with them and she talked to them about their Santa's lists. And she talked to them about plastic and the impact it has on the environment. And then she said to them, like, I'm not going to tell you to take them off. It's your choice. But I wanted you to be aware of the consequences of choosing plastic in this way. And then she just left them to make their own decisions. And the 8-year-old took all of the toys off, and the 4-year-old just left one toy on. So she honored that and bought the toy for the child for Christmas. But I just thought, what amazing parenting, because this is our next generation. I didn't sit down with my kids and talk about plastic, and I wish I had. It's like those little things that seem so inconsequential can make a huge difference. Huge.
Yeah. No, that's a great reminder. So we're coming to the end of our time together today. And I'm very conscious with our conversation, and as I learn more about this whole idea of being a sacred change maker, that conscious leadership and being a sacred change maker has a lot of similarities, a lot of overlap, and in fact maybe they're synonymous. But what words of wisdom would you have for those who aspire to be a conscious leader or a sacred change maker?
Hmm. I think the first thing is that we're all being called right
Mm,
now into our own sense of personal leadership, our own sense of personal responsibility, and our own sense of what the changes might be that we would like to see in the world. And I think just knowing that we can make a difference with just the small things makes a difference. And, you know, if we're not ready to move into action yet, just starting to have conversations, opening up conversations that matter with our friends and our family and people that we love. And when I say matter, I'm not just talking about a general matter, right? I'm not talking, you know, you don't have to go and talk about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals around your family dinner table. You can, but you don't have to. But it's just about what matters to you. And I think that's where it all begins. Like, really, what matters to you? So, becoming aware of that really feeds into your leadership in the world, your sense of responsibility, and also helps to give you some kind of idea of a direction that you might want to take with your life. Because, as Gandalf said, you know, what is it that you're going to do with the time that you've been given?
yeah.
That's really the only choice we've got. So that's a question for you to sit with and allow your life to show you the way.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And these conversations that matter are really important. And one of the things with the new technology, with Zoom and the opportunity is that we can connect, and personally I do connect with people around the world who are change makers. And
Right.
it really is a great opportunity to meet. But we have to take the conversations and take them to the next step, to
Yeah.
take action.
Yes.
I often talk about being committed, but committed is okay, but we've got to go and make the decision and then go and take action.
Yeah, we do.
That's going to be important too. So thank you. It's been a real pleasure to have our conversation today.
Yeah.
Learned a lot more about you too than I knew, so that was wonderful. And I know you and I will continue our conversations, but let me just share some contact information. Here we are. And so maybe you can just let us know how best to reach you and how best to learn more about the Sacred Changemakers University.
Sure. So when I talked earlier about the spiritual transmission, the sacred invitation that I got, if you go to sacredchangemakersu.com, you'll actually see the video there of the invitation. And it was my calling, and who knows, it might be something that resonates for you too. And Jayne at JayneWarrilow.com, that's my direct email, so you'll get through to me. And I'd love to hear from any of you that are interested in this kind of work, because for me, it's all about us really coming together now and seeing what we can do, not just what I can do in the world, but what can we achieve? Because I think that's probably where our answer lies. So I'd love to hear from any of you.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And I know there's a Facebook group that members are part of because I'm part of that.
That's right.
There are lots of conversations, both written and spoken. So there's
Yep.
a lots of things to get involved in and to learn from, and engage, learn, and give is just such a wonderful reminder. So thank you again.
Yeah.
And so for me, my contact information is on here too. And as many of you know, I record these podcasts every couple of weeks, so you can find them on YouTube. And I love to hear from you, so please reach out. My email is on the screen, paulw@drpaulward.com. And I just encourage you to reach out, make connections. These connections that we're making are really important for the future of each of us individually and the future of our world. And Jayne's reminder of being the best for the world rather than the best in the world is perhaps a great place to end. So thank you again. And I'm looking forward to our next interaction with the Sacred Changemakers University. So I'm looking forward to that too. So thank you again. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Paul.